Now we have one last interview that's going to happen. Richard Jackson, the Deputy Attorney General for Cybersecurity Technology and Digital Assets, is going to interview John D'Agostino. And Richard Jackson currently serves as the Deputy Attorney General for the Cybersecurity Technology and Digital Assets for Oklahoma, acting as the subject matter expert on cybersecurity policy for regulation and compliance, innovation, and entrepreneurism and digital asset industry in 2021. Jackson co-founded EQ Concepts, a venture-backed blockchain-based ticketing startup that was acquired in 2024. Jackson also served as an advisor to the Oklahoma Bitcoin Association, University of Oklahoma Polytechnic Institute, and to Folds Ventures, the veteran and first responder-focused Folds of Honor Venture Capital Fund. And he's going to be interviewing John D'Agostino, Senior Institutional Strategist at Coinbase. John is Head of Strategy for Coinbase Institutional. He's the former Head of Strategy of the New York Mercantile Exchange. John is the subject of 2 New York Times best-selling books and lectures in fintech at Oxford, MIT, and Columbia Universities. John is the chair of the UK Consultant Financial Services Working Group and AIF Global Financial Innovation Institute Fellow Research Affiliate at MIT CSAIL, and the co-founder of the AIMA Digital Asset Working Group. These 2 guys have great resumes. I understand very little of what they've done, which probably means they are important people. So please welcome them. This is our last one, and then I'll wrap us up. And after that, we'll go to party. Thanks. How's it going?
Okay. Am I on? All right. Well, thank you everyone for making it all the way to the end, our last conversation of the day. I think what better way to close out day 1 than with a discussion about where do we go from here. So our fireside chat is Litecoin. Where do we go from here? So John, I think I'll open up the conversation starting, if we're thinking about moving forward, maybe looking backwards, talking about where we came from. So I think, relative timeframes, maybe recent history, let's call it post-FTX to today. If you want to go a little further back than that, you can. But set the stage for the audience with a foundation. Where have we been? Talking about then where we're going.
Sure, and I'll speak from the institutional investor perspective, sovereign wealth funds, the folks I speak to, like yourself, some state treasurers, large asset owners, insurance pools, like getting them over the hump of embracing this asset class. So, FTX was horrible. I think sometimes we try to gloss over the impact. And in fairness, I think crypto was treated unfairly during FTX. So in the same 12-month period of FTX implosion, which I think net probably lost, or people effectively broke even, but let's say lost less than $500 million of investor capital. Not on a mark-to-market basis, but on a notional basis. The LME, the London Metals Exchange, canceled close to $14 billion of nickel trades in a single day because the market would have been inverted, and everybody who had made money on those trades, if they were paid out, the entire nickel market would have imploded. And who here heard about that? Who here didn't hear about that? Most of you didn't hear about that, right? So that's 14 billion of value lost. Now, if you are on the other side of that trade, if you're on the winning side of that trade and it was just canceled, that is no different from waking up and seeing your FTX crypto stolen, right? It's economically exactly the same. No congressional issues, no debates, no should the commodities market exist, none of that hand-wringing. And of course, a lot of people sued. Citadel lost 800 million, they sued. And in less than 9 months, the British court said, nope, LME is completely exempt. You can't sue it, they can do whatever they want. And we all just kind of moved on. Right, and nobody cared. So I do think it was unfair, but it was massive. So we went through a period politically, and then that filters down to large institutions, pensions and whatnot, where just it became an untouchable asset class, and that was, I think, picked up on by the current administration. And I think they went and did their polls, and they, in general, I think even today, generally, like the American public has a slightly negative view of crypto. Just when you say, it's like if you say the word derivatives or Wall Street, you just poll 1 million Americans, the majority have a negative connotation with that statement. And so the administration leaned in hard on that. That filtered through all the organizations. We all know about the debanking issue. I did a study for AIMA that was entered into the congressional record. Crypto firms and hedge funds were 9 times more likely to be denied basic banking services than non-crypto hedge funds. And we presented that to the Senate. We now, I think we're gonna see congressional hearings around it, just like Choke Point 1.0, people will be fired if they haven't already. So I think it's impossible to overstate the magnitude of transition that's happened in the last 7 months. We have gone from being, in my view, the least hospitable large economy for this asset class to operate in to arguably number one in the space of 6-7 months. I know this because the day the election happened, the chairwoman of VARA, which is the Dubai regulatory agency for crypto, called me and said, how effed are we? Meaning them. Like meaning how quickly will all of this business shift from UAE back into the US? So where we were was truly awful. Some of it deserved, some of it not. Where we are now is, I think we've undergone just an unbelievably massive transition.
So I want to pull the thread on that when you talk about where we were leading into what is the transitionary period. Keying in on that transition, you obviously have some experience speaking with non-US or foreign entities. Talk about, maybe compare, contrast what those foreign governments were presenting to the industry as far as opportunity, and now as this transition has been occurring, where those value propositions are most at risk, where they are the strongest, where the U.S. has ground to make. Scale for us or provide context for when you say we're in a 7-month transition period, really how big is that? How much of a market share does the U.S. potentially gain? What are the relative strengths and weaknesses for the U.S. looking here as the sun is shining bright, you have Republican President, Senate, and House. If it's going to get passed, it's going to pass this session because it's not worth trying to do in an election year. What does this transitionary period look like? It's from a opportunities and risks perspective, and where's the biggest value?
So offshore jurisdictions like the UAE were offering 3 things for the last 5 years. They were offering first and foremost, tax exemptions, right? And not so much for the US, but still it was a lower tax environment. You don't pay city or state. But if European or anywhere else in the world, you lived in a zero tax environment, right? Now, but they've been offering that for 25 years. I've been going to the UAE for 25 years, and that's always been the value proposition. What's changed since COVID is a market increase in the quality of life there. So you can raise a family, there's good schools, there's good restaurants, there's Broadway shows, so if you handle the heat is manageable, just like in Florida, and so you have high quality of life, you have, again, for ex-US, you have a phenomenal tax condition, and then they seized on the opportunity what they saw the US pushing out technologies like artificial intelligence and blockchain, and they didn't just wave it in, they aggressively waved it in, and they did that in 2 ways. One is 3 ways. One is they made it relatively, it's still expensive to set up a business in the UAE, but relatively seamless to set those businesses up. So you can get up and running with minimum viable product type regulatory status in less than 3 months, and while you're waiting around to get your full regulatory status in less than a year usually. A very, very, very hospitable regulator. Their regulator has a business development mandate and department. So the juxtaposition of dealing with those regulators for these types of businesses versus the U.S. or even FCA or EU regulators, just totally night and day. And then lastly, they were eating their own dog food. They were either investing aggressively and supporting these startups or building sandboxes where it wasn't just sort of carved out and operating in the ether. They were actually putting government systems on blockchain and testing. And if it worked, utilizing those for driver's licenses and other areas. And I think it took a while for people to realize how much they had leapfrogged the U.S. in sort of that baseline technology infrastructure. I remember being in Riyadh about a year ago, and I pulled out a credit card to pay for something, and my driver's license fell on the table, and all the Saudi guys were laughing at me. They were like, "You still have a physical driver's license?" Like and they showed me how they renew their driver's license with one button. So I think there was this kind of awakening. I mean, I started going to Dubai 25 years ago. The book that was written about me was about the work I did in Dubai and when I got kidnapped and all this stuff 15 years ago. And back then, when I would tell people I lived and worked there briefly, they would kind of, "Oh, that's amazing." Now, half the country seems like has been, particularly in crypto, has been to the region. They see the high quality of life. So that was the value proposition, and it was winning, absolutely winning. I mean, they had a 800 to 1,000 queue at VARA and ADGM for blockchain startups, hedge funds and other at the point in time. Now, how much of that is sucking back to the U.S.? A meaningful amount, particularly the larger ticket items, but you can't compete with the tax incentives. Like that's something that we will never be able to compete on. The reason that Brevin Howard, the reason that these large hedge funds have 400, 500, 600 people now sitting in the UAE is the ability to attract the highest quality individual. So if I met you in Dubai 15 years ago and you told me you were in medicine, law, or finance, and you were American, Australian, or European, I would leave thinking, yeah, he's probably the B team. Like the A team doesn't come here. Like he flamed out in London and he's here reinventing himself. Not anymore. They're getting the highest quality people because of all those reasons I cited. So they're going to still win to some degree, but I will say now the ability for I'll just speak to in financial terms, a crypto hedge fund, for example, to get up and running in the U.S. to get banking services is demonstrably increased. So you go there if you want the tax break. You don't go there because you have to go there anymore.
Okay, and so opportunity still exists. Let's now consider it a little bit of a let's change sides from private sector to public sector. Let's talk about if we were to have these conversations with lawmakers or regulators to say that this is a strategic advantage for a foreign region that we want to become competitive. Speak to if you had 10 minutes with the president or 10 minutes with a singular decision maker, what items or what bullet points or talking points would you want to make sure to communicate that we in the industry, given the opportunity to speak with regulators at the state level, at the national level, to echo, would say these are the things that make the U.S. competitive. Here's the reasons why from an economic strategy or a national security strategy that we want these businesses to exist here. What would be the main things that, kind of as we capitalize on the transition period, speaking to lawmakers and regulators, that we'd want to communicate?
So first and foremost, tax incentives. If I think about sort of how, I mean, you think about the benefit for reduced long-term capital gains in terms of helping create this incredible liquid economic engine that the U.S. stock market, right? That's been essential. You're from Oklahoma, oil and gas, right? The dividend tax rebates for E&P exploration and all those instruments were crucial in pushing tons of retail capital into oil exploration. Now we're the #1 producer of oil. So first and foremost, tax incentives for these businesses. Secondly, pass the stablecoin legislation, which hopefully will be an on-ramp to, and just yesterday, I forget which senator announced the Clarity Bill. So pass stablecoin legislation, which hopefully will have a spillover effect to broader, clear regulations that then the SEC and CFTC can create good rulemaking on. We have a limited window, right? We don't know what the next administration is going to hold. We need rulemaking to happen now. Rulemaking, despite Atkins and Quintens being wonderful people who want to do what's best for the industry, they cannot just make rules out of thin air. They have to make rules based on law. So pass those bills, get those into law, get Quintens and Atkins on that process. Again, no matter how fast they want to move, that's a 6 to 18-month process just to get those basic rules in place. There has to be a comment period, right? So get that done. I mean, the clock's already ticking if we're worried about a shift back in transition for the next election, or even if we lose control in the midterms, if they lose control in the midterms. So you've got to start moving very, very fast. You can start with tax incentives for encouraging innovative problem-solving companies in artificial intelligence and blockchain to live and work here in the U.S. Make up a little bit for that tax. We don't have to. The thing is, like, you want to live in. People want to live in cities like New York and London. Like they want to live in America. Reduce the spread, reduce that friction associated with that move. It doesn't have to be zero. It doesn't have to match it, but get close, and people will make the choice to live in cities they want to live in. No one's going to pick up their life and move their family for 4%, for the most part. So that's the two big things. Honestly, if it's focused on just two things, that would be it. And then I think you have to not so much punish, but you've got to weed out the bureaucrats that caused the debanking issue. Many of them are still there. Like, the leadership's not there, but when I spoke to the banks that participated in my survey, so I'll give you an example. So a couple years ago, all these crypto hedge funds were getting debanked. So I had AMA reach out to a bunch of state banks and say, hey, we have all these hundreds of crypto hedge fund clients. Do you want them? And they all said, yeah, that'd be great. We compiled a list of 23 state banks, and we organized a webinar, like a meet and greet, for them to meet the potential clients. And most of the CEOs of those banks told me, this is great, don't publish that list. If you publish that list, I'll get a phone call from my regulator. And I'm from Brooklyn. These phone calls were not official. These phone calls were like when friends of my uncle used to go into the bodega and say, "This is a nice place you have here. It'd be a shame if something were to happen." These were off the books phone calls, and that happened. That's real. And so, and the people placing those calls were not at the very highest level. So that has to be weeded out. J.D. Vance got up yesterday at the Venetian and said, Choke Point 2.0 is dead and is never coming back. Respectfully, if they don't do a forensic analysis of who was involved in that process and get them all out, he can't make that claim. So that would be my third agenda item, is weed out all of these anti-crypto people and make sure they don't work for the government anymore.
So keying in, we got to go. Please, yeah, absolutely.
And I want to be clear. I don't want to put people in jail. I think sometimes we take it too far as an industry. I'm willing to acknowledge they think they're right and they think I'm wrong, and that's fine. But they didn't do their duty, so they should be terminated.
So pulling the thread on a comment you made, and effectively saying that we have 6 to 18 months, depending on the midterms, depending on the next administration. The transition that we discussed post FTX to the new election in 24, that didn't happen in a vacuum. So maybe speak to some of the grassroots efforts that led to that political transition, and then what we could potentially do to sustain that, such that a midterm election isn't as drastic of a risk event as the next presidential election is not so much of a risk event, where maintain momentum and continue the transition that we saw in 24.
Well, I'm going to turn this back on you, because we talked about this durability of this transition in the green room, and you had brilliant insights into this, and you're closer to the political process than I am. So what he and I talked about outside was everyone I know in crypto is saying, "Oh, this is fantastic, this is wonderful," but then when I talk to some institutional investors, they're like, "Oh, John, how durable is all this? Like, administrations change, executive orders can be removed by other executive orders. Like, how persistent and durable is this?" And they're right. Another administration can turn back a lot of this stuff. The counter argument, and I want to hear what you have to say about this, is what is durable is it's going to be a long time before a politician runs on an anti-crypto agenda, because they got walloped. And so I'll turn it back to you. Do you think that's a compelling counter argument?
I think that depending on the political climate, so very heavily red states versus very blue states, is that yes, you can frame that observation and those data points in different ways to communicate what is effectively a spectrum of proper responses. In some jurisdictions, in some states, simply not articulating an antagonistic perspective may be enough to say that I'm not going to pursue you in a negative sense, the crypto industry, but I'm going to let the broader consensus decide here. I'm not going to stick my neck out. I'm not going to build the next anti-crypto army. I'll at least give you that. That may be the best that you get out of very deep blue or very formerly anti-crypto regimes. On the other side, you can go to the light blues, the light reds, and say, look, states like Ohio flipped on, in part, a crypto narrative and a crypto agenda. Stand with Crypto rated and scored politicians, and we can show you with quality metrics that this is an issue that you can't not have a position on. You must articulate a position, and it is the industry's perspective, that you need to have a positive one. It doesn't have to be everything is free, the libertarian dream that we'd all would like, but you are going to have to find certain talking points that communicate well to your constituency, that you're going to have to at least make an overture to the industry to say that I'm not anti-crypto.
Yeah. I was always struck, I worked with both campaigns, and I was always struck on the Democratic side by their confidence in how many votes they would pick up by being anti-crypto. And I kept saying to them, like, fine, you believe this, but what one person, I can show you millions and millions of people who believe passionately and will vote on this issue. I don't know a single, and I know I'm very good friends with Nouriel Rubini. He's been a friend of mine for 20 years. I love Nouriel. I think he's a very smart guy. I don't agree with him. He just disagrees with me. And I don't like the way the industry has attacked him. But even my most virulently anti-crypto friend is not voting on this issue. I don't know a single person who's voting because a politician's anti-crypto. I know lots of people voting if they're pro. And so I was sort of just baffled by the information they were getting. And I do think there's a way we as an industry can help. I think we have to give people an elegant onboard, meaning like, let's not step on the necks. We won. We won. So when I'm on Twitter and I see people just trying to crush, politicians who lost or personas that lost, I don't know if that helps us as an industry. I think if we got to give people a chance to change their mind and give them an elegant and dignified way to get on board, even if we don't like it, even if we're angry that they were against us prior, because again, what you don't want is that payback down the road if there is a transition back. So we have to just kind of swallow our anger at the reticence and just for the greater good, just let people join, get on the boat if that's what they want. But yeah, I'm not a politician. I don't understand the science of politics, but I was just baffled with that calculus. I think they got bad information. They got really bad polling on this issue. Like I said, there's a difference between not saying polling 1 million Americans, so how do you feel 1 to 5, and everyone polls a 3, they're slightly negative on crypto. That is very, very different from this is an issue I wake up every day and will vote on and care about. And I think they misunderstood that too.
So I will continue that and say two things. One is on the quality of information front, that some of the best things that we collectively the industry can do is communicate to elected representatives your position, your thoughts, and your feelings about crypto. The number of elected officials who have told me that the only reason that I was talking with them, so as Deputy Attorney General giving them guidance on a policy position, whether they should vote a certain way, what it is that they're talking about, some of them don't even know that, is that a constituent picked up the phone or sent an email or came to an office call and just talked with them about it. The hurdle to make meaningful change inside of a singular office is so dramatically low, it's almost shocking. A single letter, a single email, a single phone call can be enough to switch a vote because so few people engage regularly. So that would be kind of my call to action to the audience is do not be afraid to think that your voice actually does matter because it does. The second element to that is that education is just as important at that level because you have to remember you and I maybe live, breathe this industry all the time. They have every industry in their state plus every lobbyist advocacy group trying to get time with them. And so crypto may be on the priority list down at 20, 25, 30, and they don't know what they're talking about. I have had the time a couple times where elected representatives have said, yeah, I will vote yes on this. Close the door, say, what is it that I'm voting on?
Yeah, don't get too in the weeds. If you get time with anyone, don't be that person that, have you ever sat next to anybody who's into CrossFit or veganism and they just, which I love, those are great things. I'm not into either, but that's fine. And they just won't stop and they monopolize the entire, and you want to just take a fork and stick it in your ear. But I think sometimes we have a tendency to do that same thing. I got a great compliment. I won't drop his name, but there was a Democratic state senator who was neutral. That he was a very smart guy, finance guy, understood it, just had a negative association with crypto overall. And I got some time with him alone, and I was like, look, I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you about the value proposition for proof of work or proof of stake. I'm not going to do that. Like, we don't have time to do that. All I'm going to say is about 50, 75 years ago, the collective decision was made at the government level to not care so much about semiconductor fabrication because these computers were never going to really matter. And now we might go to war because we let all of it be built on this little island a stone's throw from China. And so if you can go back in a time machine, you would agree that we should not, just in case we were wrong, maybe we'll let some of that fab happen, like, in Oklahoma. And he laughed. He was like, I'm like, so are you sure you're right about this? Are you absolutely sure in 50, 75 years we'll be having the same problem because we've pushed AI data centers and we've pushed blockchain nodes to the Middle East, to China, to places that are, and he kind of rolled his eyes a bit, but he was like, all right. He's like, fair enough. And that worked. Versus I could have spent my 10 minutes with him, arguing about the fundamental value of Litecoin or Bitcoin or something else. And maybe I would have convinced him, probably not.
The 1% doctrine comes through for victory again. Okay, the last 3 minutes closing out. We've talked about where we've been. We've talked about the transitionary period. We've talked about kind of the realities of what's going on today. Maybe pull a little bit of our Greenburn conversation back up on stage. Let's talk bright horizons and long adjacent possible futures. Where we've been, where we are, where we're potentially going, where are we going next? maybe wax philosophical about the big dreams from your seat, where you see where are we going in the 5, 10, 15, 25-year vision for the industry.
So one of my criticisms of the industry has always been, I think it's a little, it's too unrealistic about how fast things can move. When I got started on the New York Mercantile Exchange floor, it wasn't 1962, it was 2005, and they were still using open outcry to trade crude oil, the world's most valuable commodity. And it took us almost 15 years to switch it to electronic trading. So my mind's always been like, look, it's not because people are bad or evil or stupid or Luddites, it's just these systems take time. We're trying to change really important systems, like really important. You know, if I got on a plane, the pilot came out and said, hey, good news, we have a scientifically proven better engine. It's absolutely better, and today we're testing it. I'd be like, yeah, okay, maybe you test it on someone else and then me. So they're really, really important systems. So it takes time. I actually think the tipping point has occurred. I think that we're going to see tokenization and blockchain-based assets of tons of assets. A lot will fail because some things don't need more efficient mechanisms, but many won't. Many won't fail. And I think, I used to say my 7-year-old, when she's my age, would live in a world that's sort of where the dominant trust system for financial assets is blockchain-based. I think it's going to be sooner. I think it's going to be like college kids seeing it. So I think you're going to see a flurry of attempts to tokenize everything. A lot of it's going to be nonsense, but some of it's going to stick. And that's going to happen much, much faster than I thought it would because of this trend. Barring some major political rollback, barring another, maybe even if with an FTX scandal, I think the train's out of the station at this point. But barring something extraordinary, I think we're going to see over the next 3 years real serious attempts, and I know we want this to happen bottom up, but I think it's also going to happen top down in the sense of the BlackRocks of the world or whatnot are going to start to teach Americans how to use this technology, whether they like it or not. My mother, my 85-year-old mother, just moved to online banking. She fought it for 30 years. She went from Bank of America down to a credit union because she wanted to walk in, and finally the credit union people in Connecticut were like, lady, you got to get online. But she held out. So people can hold out for a very, very long time. But eventually the system just forces them to adapt. And I think we're there now. And that's good news if you want to see this technology pervade the society. I know it's maybe not great news if you want it to be sort of bottom-up permissionless in its entirety. But I do think we'll get there eventually. But yes, so I think it's a very, very exciting time, and tons of stuff is going to happen over the next 3 years.
All great. I'm seeing red and triple zeros. John, thank you for the time. Everyone, thank you for sticking around. And I believe that this is going to be the closeout for the day one.
Great job, guys. Way to stay on time.